At this moment, we are living in our past, feeling the present, and looking at our future, all at the same time. In this present world of discontentment and haste, people have chosen to sell their dreams for a man-made wealth called money. We're living in a time where everything has a price tag. Yet, the natural wealth has lost the meaning like never before in the history of mankind. In this dynamics of humanity and dance of life, there exist people lost in time, who are reflection of our own history and have remained unchanged since ages close to 60,000 years. This is the story of a civilization lost in oblivion, a civilization that may not see the end of this century. Let's have a final look at our own past before it vanishes. Let's behold the last tribe. It's been about 70 years since India gained its independence. Being a democracy, freedom was guaranteed to everyone. In fact, our population explosion has given freedom of expression a new meaning. Since independence, we have grown 4 times to over 1.3 billion. The people need to be convinced first in a system where the ultimate power lies with the voters. Perhaps no one wants to touch this unpopular discussion. Because of this massive population pressure, every year vast spans of primary forests are modified to suit the human desires. A big population may be seen as an asset, but only when we have the required means to respect the aspirations of everyone. As a result of this resource disparity, we are ultimately having a huge rich-poor divide, which is only widening every day. When India stands third in the list of number of billionaires, it also harbors approximately a quarter of the world's poor population. This ever-growing divide and disconnect is leading to the struggle between the classes, and the Naxalite movement is a reflection of it. In the summers of 2014, Naxalite situation in southern Odisha was tense, as my BSF unit was shifted from the border to anti-Naxal operations in Koraput-Malkangiri area. For me, Operation Green Hunt had a dual meaning, one as a military officer and another as a wildlife biologist. My deployment was the infamous Red Zone of southeastern Odisha, forming a part of Eastern Ghats, a land they called Naxalite area, but the wildlifer within me preferred to call heaven. The metal road used to end here, and the onward journey was possible only on foot. The distance was not judged by kilometers, but the time required in reaching. It was the tri-junction of the three states, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, and Andhra Pradesh. Despite the operational hazards, I was seeing the threat as an opportunity to explore the untrodden paths. Within 1 kilometer of my base camp was the Machkund Power Project. Established before independence, it was the power sharing agreement between Andhra and Odisha. In addition to the hydropower, the project provides ideal habitat and isolation for a few leopards who call it home. Perhaps wildlife don't actually need our supervision or management. It just requires our absence. The undulating landscape covered in thick green carpet. The meandering river valleys. The beauty of this land not only lies in the natural harmonies, but also in the untold mysteries it hides within. It was a protected area created not by decree but by circumstances. In fact, being a red zone, nothing was known about the wildlife of this area. The region has remained unexplored due to the inaccessibility and the political instability that has continued for the past few decades. Perhaps this was the only part in India where even the national flag was not hosted during Independence Day until recently. Cashew plantations on the hillside and the coffee plantation in the shady valleys were a common sight. In an area considered economically backward, these plantations were considered a way of economic upliftment of the region, which is perhaps a strategy in developing the tribal belt living below poverty line. Along with the fruit, the fleshy receptacle of the cashew was also utilized to make local country-made wine, which was then used for home consumption and selling in the market at 10 rupees a cup. During operations, camera equipments were never my priority. Most of the time I used my pocket smartphone to shoot things and just to get a quick shot while moving. I was fighting the war and studying the nature at the same time. While moving in the forest, we have to remain focused all the time. Slightest mistake could be disastrous. During anti-Naxal operations in the interiors, many times I encountered tribal groups making liquor along the freshwater channels, resembling somewhat like Naxal campsite, one of the many situations that used to test our decision making. Any error in judgment could lead to the collateral damage that we could never afford. My base camp at Ankadeli had a hilly terrain all round. It was a previous Naxal stronghold and a point of motivational meetings of Naxals before the forces got deployed here. The degree of their influence is depicted by the Naxal memorial in Hanumal village, built in the remembrance of their slain leaders, and also included name of the Naxal leaders killed in other states of India. This region is basically a tribal belt dominated by Gadba, Kandha and Bondas, having their own distinctive cultures. The Ankadeli market has huge rush on Thursdays. It was a day of the local tribes to sell their goods, and also a day for the foreigners to see these tribes firsthand. Apart from all the tribes in this region, the Bonda tribe caught my attention in particular. This primitive tribe inhabits the remote highlands in the eastern Ghats of southern Odisha. The inaccessibility of this area has not only allowed this tribe to continue their ancestral ways, but also have given fertile grounds for the Naxalite movement to flourish. The Bondas have been living completely disconnected with the mainstream since eternities. Living away from the civilization, the only time people get to see these hill Bondas is when they come out in the weekly markets to sell their forest produce. Walking for hours in the hills from their village in Andral and then going back before sunset. But there were two more Bonda villages further ahead of Andral that have chosen to remain silent in their hilly abodes. Unlike the Bondas of Andral, they neither speak or understand Odia or any Dravidian language. In fact, their language has links with Afro-Asiatic language family. The Bondas in this region are entirely dependent on nature and believes in the subsistence on the forest itself. These two Bonda villages, Dumripada and Badvel, were located ahead of the usual Naxal routes, way beyond our area of domination, and were never reached by the security forces. These were the last two villages that have preserved their original primitive lifestyle. It was perhaps an ultimate opportunity to see the prehistoric values and experience the ancient customs of India. A rare prospect to understand a civilization that is untouched from various revolutions, and also to know if Naxals have any influence on their existence. I then started preparing for this big operation. The route towards the Bonda Valley runs northwest of River Machkund, amidst steep valleys and thick forests. Rising about 3,000 feet above sea level, this was a wild and picturesque territory, rich in flora and fauna. The terrain was challenging, yet spellbinding at the same time. The forests were thick and filled with huge climbers. The inviolate space provided by the primary forest has allowed the giants of the animal kingdom to thrive here, giving refuge to the largest moth species in the world, the Atlas moth. The enormous black emperor scorpion could be seen everywhere, sometimes even found in our shoes. The Malabar giant squirrel was frequently observed in the forest canopies, showing a continuous distribution along the river valley, which I later realized was in fact connecting two larger populations of Malabar giant squirrels. The people in this region practice sustainable fishing. After receiving the catch, they release the smaller fish back in the water and just catch the bigger ones. This allows the fish to attain huge sizes, like this 25 kg fish, which was seen being carried by two villagers to the weekly market in Anka, Delhi. It was truly the land of the giants. In these forests, one cannot afford to let the guard down and have to be watchful for any minor sign or unnatural modification in the environment. for it could be IEDs, traps, or ambush. You're constantly analyzing the terrain while moving in the forest. Spotting wildlife comes naturally when you're walking in such a watchful way. The head marking of this trinket snake was quite peculiar and made me record its identifying features. After taking some close shots and noting the morphological characters, I left the snake in its habitat. Later, after referring to various literatures, I could not find any exact description of this snake. And how could I? It was a new subspecies of trinket, described later that year. Such was the uniqueness of this habitat. Moving in the valley about 4 kilometers from my base camp, this hardworking creature caught my eyes. I quickly grabbed my mobile and started recording. As one of my guards shouted, this deer barely gave me a few seconds. Luckily, my mobile was on shooting mode already. It was a chausinga, the four-horned antelope, a species difficult to spot even in the well-protected tiger reserves of India. During my deployment period, I had multiple sightings and signs of chausinga around Odisha-Andhra border. Despite hunting pressures, this rare species was found thriving in the Naxalite area. Their distribution seems to run parallel to the Machkund River, away from all the human habitations. Many of the villagers were also seen keeping the fawns of the barking deer as pets, or perhaps just waiting for it to grow in size. We thank the dung beetle and move ahead. It was a long journey through a diverse terrain. The virgin forest was nourishing the wildlife biologist within me, allowing me to understand the dynamics of life in a war zone. I used to get the wildlife cues from direct sightings, sign surveys, roadkills, and also the hunted animals. The Bonda men derive their identity from their arms, bows, and arrows. Moving up in the valley, we met a group of men who shared their bear encounter with us. They said they shot him an arrow and the bear ran away in the valley, and now they were going down to search for it. I was amazed to see the audacity of the group. Sloth bear was seen as a conflict animal in this region and was responsible for serious injuries and fatalities across the state. India as a country has lived very closely to the nature and has always been in awe of the forces of it, to the level of worshipping Mother Nature and its creations like God. A reason for our relative tolerance towards wildlife. Perhaps we would be learning something from these hill bondas who were custodians of these ancient beliefs. Monsoon in this region were continuous and unpredictable. The weather can flip in a very short time. Moving across, one keeps getting wet and dry in a cyclic way. It was raining heavily that night, and we had to stay in the forest itself. We woke up early next day in the glorious morning and started our move after the morning tea. It was our second day of the trek. On the way, we met a familiar face. She was the same Bonda lady we encountered making liquor in the valley couple of months back. I know we all looked similar in the uniform, but I was hoping that she might recognize us. She was from the Andral village and spoke Bonda language. Still, I thought that our Odia soldier could have some meaningful conversation with her.
Botol mot suro bero ni dak boro afi abe ti saguri gare musani loi indro se galas bero ni sa ni sai tine do fi botol bero ni abe ti afi ani mar munri ba bar ning na fodre pe de buri munri ba se munri ta ba ngari se ma ani fodre kadu to ri biskot le bodale bero fe man khia ani no ne
बिस्कुट खाइबु देले
ani no ne abe to fi
पंचायत ऑफिस चावल मिलुची
saul bilsi
केते केजी
kai rani de gota bol de gota korle
करले पर ये किरोसिनी मिलुची
kerasin zoi promosi moi suma se kena gen lo zora ni se
अच्छा कोरापुट
ara kawiti no jai
अच्छा न
jai ani dukare ko सब बनी हुई
औषध कुठो आणुछ जर हले औषध कुठो आणुछ
ani ngoso betnali
फुड खरिबुटुरु
koru puduru akinen go boksa dai ta ko oso be
आसुची केते तो बंडा लोक केते अछ
agula ro be to agula ngom
बोधु घर
बहुत गरा agula ro be to so
केते को कष्ट होची कि माने केते को जिंस मिलुची न मिलुची कष्ट होची किछि नै
kai ta sama makti ngoi gule ni morma mo bonda kata uba kona pe maro busting le ya
Being handicapped in the Bonda language, our interaction went on expected lines. But all I could make out was that change is surely percolating down in the Bonda society. In these depths of the forest, no journalist has ever entered, and whatever I'll record would have an archival value to understand this ancient community. While crossing Andral and moving towards our ultimate goal of reaching Dumripada and Badvel, I was thinking that how we will speak to them. None of us knew the Bonda language, and the Bondas, they neither knew Odia or Hindi. The Bondas here are known for their fiercely independent spirit. They address themselves as Remo. Of all the 32 villages of Bonda tribe, these two villages were the most remotely located. After 2 days of walking, the villages were finally within sight. But the initial move was crucial. I would hate to surprise them. It was always a good idea to meet the village elders first. But the big question was, how do we communicate? We started off with the universal language that we all understand, the language of love. Gradually, we started gaining their trust. But neither of us could have a verbal exchange. It was more like a Russian talking to a Chinese. Despite being a few in numbers, this tribe has successfully retained the distinctive features of its culture, mainly due to the geographical isolation and more perhaps due to its independent spirit. The Bondas have a unique way of dressing up. Clean-shaven head decorated with headbands of palmyra stripes and plated fillets of caryota fibers stands out in sharp contrast with other tribal groups, where women have long hairs arranged in buns. The neck covered with multiple aluminium rings called khagla and a mass of colored bead necklaces around the neck. The bangles were made of brass, covering the whole of the lower arm. In addition, the Bondas wear brass earrings called limbi. A short and narrow stripe of loincloth called ringa was weaved at home. These ornaments perhaps have a function of protecting them from the injuries and attacks by the wild animals. Among the tiled roof, I noticed a cemented house. My curiosity took me to Simon. He was the odd one. After interaction, I came to know that he originally hails from Kerala and have been working here for a NGO, living in this village for last 4 years with his family. He was a link between the government schemes and the Bondas and also managed a small school for the Bonda tribes. And the biggest factor was that he was someone who understands their culture and knew their language and had the confidence of the tribe. He was my window to the Bonda's way of life.
We have to make 3 categories. Older generation, 0 literacy rate. Adults, we can say 20%. Then youngsters like youth, 9 to 14 age. They are in Dumbripada, so we can say 100%.
Simon managed to convince the village elders for an interview. I could not have asked for more. In the era of 4G, these 2 Bonda villages have no television or mobile with them. I was curious to know about their knowledge of the other world and was wondering what their demands would be. While interacting, I was keeping a constant vigil on the surrounding, holding my rifle and operating the camera simultaneously.
Actually, we joined in 2010 as a family. Government started a lot of this hostels for the children to bring them up in the higher education level. Income generating programs like mango plantation, cashew plantation.
Okay.
Other activities government is doing
Okay.
to bring them in a mainstream level. Last 5 years I never met any Naxal people, but I heard some of the issues from other side of this area like Patraput, Sindiguda, Kalguda and all. But I never heard about any news from our village. Pena Mapru. Nena Bondale Mui Mapru Tukera, Nen Pujarile, my mama, Webukunda, Kunda, Mayusundo, Kena Ambona, Mapuru Ne Pujadam to ne, give me a set to Negera. Is in Ambona, Mapru Naimi, Mama Taki.
Mapro na mapro kunda bora si gini aset ni kena si bangala na muna awai boleh na kunda sobo borak sobo si kena kena daun di sari mai ringo na rona ara ano butu na muna ara kunda sobo ta si kena ano di dayo sobo ta surongi kunda sobo ta do sega suno na surongi kunda u bok mama na gising to sing
itu namanya
gimi ara
gising to sing
kunda
Muy ane ogos la kota. Pe gula kena kena oluk to pe kera. Kena maapule ne oluk to ne ambokurung kena bang ane bang.
Dei namanya saat ki
kena maro na ne inte kondeka bonda kanti do se muy ake ini dukuga nina gutun niom do na kena kopra ne amak tuni kopra amak tuni po amak tuni do mbo kui pule ikin po bangaro na kui puni kena songgu kena lui ga o ngosa atau kena ne gulayu saman atu garo na ne mi sundar dusla ne lisat ne sundar ara sa khali deo duku pule sa ani hiyo budi giasu
sa gutun pulay akena sa demo kuni akena sa gutun karma kurung se po se demo kuni kena sa gutun gorbu origin le aikena bero na rona khorlek kherong bero kuni gutun sami kerong ridar bero na rona ani aikena bero na kenlang bai su tabro suksu sega tu kuni marona khali deo ani sa obdi ya subdo sega kendalu kuni ta gulayu ken tu na kende mona gulayu ken ademo na ikini remo su sundor kona kali demo maya na kena se gubule kenangger selale ana dress oluk burga sari oluk burga sa na kena sa mae tu pule monara sa na mae yongi na tu hunungsa যদি আনি ইয়ং আগুই গাড়ো না মি এসা আমাই না বরেলে বিবে রতা কেন বিবে রতা যদি এন্তুক দে তো এন্তুক মাইন বক রাইসাম বক সা মাই আনা গুবুলে আতুক তা এসা কেনা মুই না এনা পে ইংলিশ আমার পে सुना सुको केना बुंग बुंग दुता केना सा
प्रश्न दुता पे आना ओलुक तो पे इंगेर सेलाले आ ओलुक तो चा आपे मा पे सरदा की मा डेंगुता पे ना मुन वितर
de bulo so ngone de se teni ni odem se diken oluk se ara ana remo ama esa aku esa boleng oluk na den tai oluk na den bagi sar sa oluk na den tai kil oluk na den kena oluk warak be mai
पे डिकेनु ओलुक से लेमो तो पे की तोगो बुंग तो पे रोना पे आपे डिकेन आडे दाई तापरे ओबुदी सुलोय तुरता केरा अभ्यास हां आपे मा डेंगुता आना मुई बुबू नेना वो गायना डिकेन डेंगना आने ओबुदी डिकेन देंदा केरा
nei maro na dau belau kiersa dau belau
So when we came here, no, that mother used to wear this kind of things, but she totally changed.
But now she's not wearing.
That on mother is
that metal thing.
on mother
Okay.
is standing there. No?
This one.
Did she stop completely or like?
She removed her.
Okay. Why so? Anything specific?
So she went to the medical for
Okay.
X-ray. That day she removed, then she didn't do it.
Okay.
पे नैना भारत देश ना प्रधानमंत्री जाडो से मक्तु पे मोदी जी डोसे मुंडा इमीडु ता आमाय समोड़ तु पे आपे पे आना मामा ओइन तु पे नैना प्रधानमंत्री इला बोरा दुतुन दोना पे आना सुसु गोंग तु पे
My gulonge photo kena demo sega uise gosi tobe.
gosu ite
Mama dorkar maro seki mama sunto pekiro.
पे सुन तु पे
Sumbe.
aqui pe oi kali damo se duro ka damo yang gurbari
Mama ate mama dorkar sum.
karki ani turun bolara ani dagara ani sunna bangka ani obudi bonda bokro se obudi gorom kinai naraji bok dasa saptar susang si oi pecari sama sui oi asara sudah aku lagi pe oi ana sara
नैना सम ओइने तापरे नी
rutun rasi suno ana sumbe di barma mantri rase ga mui dili bokra ala remo
Finally, we could manage a fruitful interaction with them and gain some insights of their culture. It was reassuring to know that the Naxals have no direct impact on these two villages and the Bonda tribes. The demands of the tribe was not luxury, but bare necessities. The channels in the valley were full of flowing water, with freshly sown paddy, their primary food. For the requirements of meat, they eat chicken, goats, and even cows. Every part, including the intestine, were cleaned and consumed, and the hide was left to dry up. The Bondas are expert hunters. Hunting in the groups, they sometimes light the hills on fire to flush out the animals. Fire was also used to clean up the forest for new plantations. Wild pigs, chausinghas, or barking deers. No animal can escape those pointed arrows.
कितना तीर मारा इन्होंने?
କେତେଟା ତୀର ମାରିଲା?
ଗୋଟେ ତୀର ମାରିଥିଲା ଯେ କୁକୁର ଥିଲା ଆମେ ଗୋଟେ ତୀର ଆଜି ମାରିଦେଲୁ।
ମାନେ କେତେ ଚାରିଟା? ଚାରି ତୀର ମାରା?
After the hunt, they perform rituals for appeasement of the forest gods in their own way. The tribal society was matriarchal. The dominance of women was also reflected in the marital norms of the community. The Bonda girls largely marry boys who are at least 5 to 10 years younger than them. The girls look after their husband as he grows up, and in turn he cares for his older wife. Unlike most other populations of India, the sex ratio in Bonda community is tilted towards the women. The women are the primary workers and providers of food for the community. Bondas in general love their wine, which is made by cashew receptacle or rice. The practice of wine making is a labor-intensive job and is led by the women folks, like most other difficult jobs. While returning back to the base camp, we decided to have some interaction with the winemaking group in Andral. Luckily, one of the young lady could speak Odia.
ये जो मद को मद ये
ଏଇଟା ଚାଉଳ ମନ୍ଦ ହେଇଛି।
अच्छा ସିଏ ये पिंदी थी तमे कहीं पिंदी ना
ଆମେ ପିନ୍ଧିବୁନି ସାର୍।
कहीं की
ଆଜିକାଲି ସମସ୍ତେ ଏମିତି ଶାଢ଼ୀ ପିନ୍ଧିଲା ଡ୍ରେସ୍ ପିନ୍ଧିଲା ଆମେ ପିନ୍ଧିବୁନି।
तो पिला माने पिंदी कोन पिंदी रेला ताकर बड़े
ଆଜିକାଲି ଯେଉଁ ପିଲାମାନେ ପିନ୍ଧିବୁନି
आ पिंदी ना
It is clear that the new generation is getting in touch with the modern world and is not likely to wear the Bonda attire or continue with the Bonda tradition. At the turn of this century, these long surviving cultures and those metal rings may not be visible anymore. The Remo language is now an endangered tongue, as more Bondas like this in Andral are gradually shifting towards Odia as their primary language of communication. The absence of a script for the Remo adds to the threat of its extinction. Like the evolution of species, human evolution is also inevitable. The success of any community depends on how sustainably it utilizes the common resources. Perhaps that is the reason why this tribe has survived for that long. Maybe the world can draw this leaf out of the Bonda's book before it finally closes. The time spent in the Naxalite area gave me a glimpse of how our past would have been. When the groundwater was plentiful, rainfall was good, when air quality was not an issue, when summers were not as hot, and we could enjoy a little greenery around us. The health of biodiversity is key to the overall well-being of our own species as well. Our success as a species is also its downfall. With our growing population and differential access to resources, this rich-poor divide will continue to grow, giving rise to the internal unrest and civil wars. Perhaps we could answer this problem with economic development. But the big question is, are we actually gaining anything by impoverishing nature? Isn't it one step forward and two steps back? We are happily clearing the primary forest, evolved since eons, replacing the original forest with the man-made ones. A holistic development is only possible when we account for the vital ecological services of nature, a priceless commodity we have ceased to value. Maybe after reaching the developed status, these Eastern Ghat hills would be replaced with something like the garbage ghats already emerging on the boundaries of Delhi. We may end up inventing a few new diseases and pay for our medical treatment with the money we have earned with our so-called development. It's high time the humanity signs an MOU with the environment as well, before it's too late. In a land where people cannot differentiate between soldiers and Naxals, a land where even the concept of a country does not exist, the idea of wildlife protection is difficult to propagate. But I still believe that the ecosystem and wildlife of this area will remain healthy until the human intervention overpowers the natural balance. The life surviving in this unique war zone has defined survival of the fittest in real terms. Perhaps no single species has ever caused such profound changes to the environment like us. No wonder that these primary forests are still found only in the battle zones, like this in Odisha, where safety and access are an issue. Maybe it's time to have our own customized development goals that are in sync with our historical values and ethos, and do not believe in development at the cost of nature. Mother Nature has survived as molten magma. She is neither fragile nor she is gasping for air. In fact, this misnomer applies more to the humans that may not survive the environmental changes beyond a certain point. It is not our environment that needs us, rather, it's the other way around. At this rate of human-induced evolution, the Homo sapiens could itself become the last tribe.